Our animals provide amazing mirrors reflecting back our energy. And a lot of us here, as empowered and awake members, we realize that our intimate human relationships are great for reflection as to where we are along our spiritual journey. But what has been remained unexplored until today is one of our most amazing assets and potentials, which is our pets. And so that actually is my life passion, to talk about humans, about the many ways that our animal companions help us along our ascension path. And so as Ethan mentioned, by 2016, I'd left my job in corporate advertising, and I'd been working as a dog trainer for a few years. And because I loved animals, I knew there had to be more to be done to really honor that bond between pets and their humans. And that same year, I was downloaded from the Animals and the Pleiadians a roadmap, helping us understand how our pets' behaviors can help us grow and move along our spiritual path. So that's my relationship with the animals. So I just wanted to get a quick check-in with you guys. If any of you guys have pets, raise your hands and keep them up. Thanks. Okay, cool. And so if you have birds, lower your hands. If you have fish, lower your hands. If you have hamsters, gerbils, rabbits, lower your hands. If you have cats, lower your hands. If you have dogs, lower your hands. Very cool, and we still have a few. I love how when we get out of, urban environments, we have all sorts of pets. Now, if any of you guys have ever felt connected to either someone's pet, a pet growing up, or even an animal in the wild, raise your hands. Awesome, so we're all pet lovers here. We all love animals, whether it's at home or in the wild. And a lot of us here are on our spiritual path. Right, and so as we're on our spiritual path, a lot of us must wonder about our guides. Some of us feel connected to angels. Some of us feel connected to the cosmic connection with the galaxies. Others of us feel connected to the fairy realm, right? And then some of us with ascended masters like Buddha, Kuan Yin, and Jesus. And especially early on in our spiritual development, we all might feel like we're waiting for an audience with our guides. Right? And so what happens is, as we go along our spiritual journey, sometimes we discount some of the most important and powerful guides that are right next to us, our animal companions, right? Because they're alongside us right now, helping us walk this path of ascension and create bigger shifts in our lives. Because when we create shifts in our lives, it improves their life as well. And so today is really going to be talking about shifts. Right? And they really, as Ethan mentioned, they really transformed my life. So for those who don't know me, I'm a certified dog obedience trainer. I'm a pet intuitive, I'm a pet numerologist, and I'm the founder of a company called Pet Prana. I also like to say that I'm a pet groupie. That kind of encapsulates who I am as a person in general. And I feel like if you're here tonight, you're a pet groupie as well. So join the club, right? And then I also like to say that I make up 50% of the global Brazilian Oklahoman population. My sister makes up the other 50%. So my dad's Brazilian, my mom's from Oklahoma, but we grew up in Brazil. And so growing up in Brazil with Oklahoman values was very interesting, as it was having Brazilian values in Oklahoma, cut to me at church camp, 9 years old in a Brazilian bikini, and the counselors were running at me with, a towel to cover me up. But all joking aside, it was a really interesting upbringing, right? Because I got to be exposed to as much of the traditional traditions as some of the more fantastical rituals of Brazil, right? By high school, I was undergoing spiritual surgeries. I was jumping waves and throwing white roses as offerings to the sea goddess. I was a certified Reiki practitioner, all the while teaching Sunday school to 5-year-olds. So it really was an interesting opportunity to combine different philosophies and see how seemingly disparate ideas can not only play off each other, but make them stronger, right? I had no attachment to one set of beliefs over another. And so then, as Ethan mentioned, I found myself coming to the United States. I did college here. I started working in advertising. And in retrospect, it was the perfect job to lead up to everything we're going to be talking about here today. Because advertising is all about identifying motivations, trends, symbols, colors, and that's what the animals are here working with us, right? And I would say that that background really got me to where I am today, which is combining traditional dog training with pet intuition, pet numerology, and I would say the rest is history, but it's actually what we're going to be talking about more today in more depth. So it's really about those shifts, right? And so what I'm going to invite you to do today is join me in shifting our perception about our animal companions, right? Beyond looking at their behavior as being naughty or nice, we're going to change it up to look at them as amazing little ascension guides. So it's all about creating the shift from me versus my pet's behavior to that royal we, where we're all in this together. It's a partnership, and we're learning from each other and growing together on the ascension path. And the good news is that shifts are something that we're very familiar with, right? We've seen it a lot in the collective. And so, we find ourselves in the midst of a lot of shifts and a lot of changes, right? Even in the past 40 to 50 years, definitely within our lifetime, we've seen a lot of changes. And you and I find ourselves bridging the old paradigm and the new paradigm, the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. But we find ourselves in that middle ground, right, where mindfulness is becoming a thing, conscious living, right, and it permeates pop culture now. It goes beyond just this conscious community. And so it so much permeates our culture that it's changing how we exercise, how we decide to spend our extracurricular time, how we eat. So let's talk a little bit about that. So the swell has definitely been building, and if we think of the old paradigm, right, think exercise. Some of us might remember when the gold standard in exercise was aerobics, right? It's all about that physical exertion and that workout. And nowadays, we're choosing more exercises that are more well-rounded. We see more yoga, right? Of course, it works on the physical strength, but it also combines the breath work and the mindful practices. If we think about the way we ate, right? In the old paradigm not too long ago, I think back to my advertising days, clients always wanted a steakhouse, right? That was the gold standard. And even by the time I left advertising, they were asking for more of the farm-to-table options, maybe even vegan options. So a lot of us find ourselves moving away from the old way of eating and into more sustainable diets for ourselves as well as for our planet, right? We see juicing becoming more popular. We see vegan diets, pescatarian diets, organic diets. We're going to farmer markets more. So it's really shifting a little bit. We think about big institutions, right? We're moving towards more decentralization. In the past, we might have trusted those big banks, right? We might have trusted the big organizations. But within our lifetime, the too big to fail was a huge turning point for us, right? And so we're seeing less and less trust in the behemoths and moving more towards that decentralization and even, currencies like Bitcoin. So no longer, as individuals, are we trusting those big organizations to make decisions on our behalf without the discussions, right? Another huge shift in our paradigm as we kind of go into the new paradigm is think accumulation, right? Think Reagan, the era of fast cars and credit cards and fancy clothes, right? That was a time where we were choosing jobs based on the paycheck. Nowadays, we're moving towards those opportunities for more fulfilling careers, right? And when we do bring in a paycheck, we're spending it more on experiences and spiritual opportunities rather than so much on materialistic possessions. We see those people who purchased those McMansions in the 90s and they're giving it up for that tiny house living surrounded by nature with the idea that materialistic possessions no longer bring the fulfillment that we thought it did at one point, right? And so we see all these shifts, and if you're feeling a little bit unsettled, or as if you're in uncharted territory, it's because we are, right? We're approaching that age of Aquarius, that age of more fluidity. We see big emotions being played out on stage. And in order to welcome in that age of Aquarius, which most of us, sorry, late night today, most of us have our reference as the musical Hair, right? It's that era of brotherhood, unity, collaboration. But in order to make room for those values and patterns to come in, we're experiencing a little bit of those growing pains, right? It might feel a little uncomfortable as we see these big patterns playing out on the large scale and in the collective. And it's all part of that letting go, that releasing, and that in-between as we bridge into the new reality. So as we look at these shifts, a lot of us have that same desire to bring the same unity, partnership, and collaboration to our animal companions, right? It's all about finding that royal we with our animal companions, no longer coming from a place of separation, from us versus them. No longer are we coming from a place of dominance and hierarchy. We're coming from a place of collaboration, right? And I think it's also worth mentioning at this point that you're going to hear me throughout this talk use the verbiage pet parent, pet guardian. I try to stay away from terminology like pet owner, because to me that feels very old paradigm, and it's one of the few ways, even if we don't have a pet at the moment, that we can usher in some of that new energy into the conversation. So we find ourselves in this time of shift, bridging two realities. So let's talk about how we can create these shifts in our lives so that they translate more broadly to the collective. And the way that Wayne Dyer talked about spiritual awakening was always fascinating to me, and it made a lot of sense. The way he talked about any individual spiritual awakening was there were 3 phases. The first phase was the beginning of our path. It was the initiation phase. And this is typically when we see, a catalyst happen, or a, dark night of the soul, which we hear about. Something that propels us to thirst for knowledge, to thirst for connection. And as we get these new tools, we're able to revisit old hurts and wounds in that new light and start understanding in hindsight how they actually got us to where we are today and how it was a gift. The second phase, according to Wayne Dyer, is the middle ground. And that middle ground is sort of a more mindful mindset. It probably feels more familiar to a lot of us right now, especially after this weekend and all these amazing talks, right? The middle ground is really about, as we approach obstacles or experiences that are difficult, we catch ourselves. Rather than looking around and saying, this is happening to me, I'm a victim, getting enmeshed in those old stories, we're actually able to see in the moment how it's a gift, how it's growing, how this theme plays out more broadly. So we're able to make decisions and assessments from a place of collaboration and from mindfulness, rather than from a place of fear and separation. The final stage that Wayne outlines is going to be that stage of synchronicity, being in the flow, being co-creative. And in this phase, nothing's happening to you, and we're not characterizing anything as good or bad, right? Experiences are experiences, and we're calling them in for the good of ourselves and the collective, right? We're at flow with the universe, with ourselves, and there's none of that separation. And what's really cool about that is that we find ourselves more and more in that flow. So we're getting little tastes and glimpses of this. The other really cool thing about the phase with pure synchronicity is that we no longer need anyone to reflect anything back to us, because there's no lessons anymore. We're accepting and being part of the experience and the circle of life. So if you listen to these stages outlined by Wayne, they kind of are reminiscent of the 3D, the 4D, and 5D realities that we talk about so much in the spiritual community, right? Because if you think of, the 3D with our pets, perhaps what happened is your pet got sick, or your pet transitioned or passed away, right? Those are the kind of catalysts that get us started on our spiritual path, right? And that myth of separation, that feeling that they are no longer with us, create that thirst. The 4D, that's really going to be where most of us are vibrating now, right? This might be a situation where if you're thinking of your pet or of an intimate relationship or a loved one, this would be when in the moment, if your loved one is triggering you, or maybe your animal companion is having accidents and it's frustrating you, rather than getting stuck in that frustration and that story, you say, okay, there's something going on here more broadly in my life that I have to look at. So you're using them as a mirror to collaborate. And that's where most of us find ourselves vibrating these days, right? And then the 5D, that final stage, that's a little bit of, we get those moments of synchronicity here or there that we feel opportunities just coming to us. We're in the flow. And as we're able to vibrate more and make those choices mindfully, we're creating shifts for ourselves. And as we create shifts for ourselves, we create them for the collective as well. So as we up-level alongside our animal companions, so will the collective. We're all along for the ride. And so, as we're going through these phases, it's all going to be about clearing out our energetic clutter, right? It's our animals mirroring back things through their behaviors so that we can really look at these opportunities in the middle ground in the 4D reality and shift, right? And so that's one of their most powerful things that they provide to us on the ascension path. And for us, our energetic clutter looks like limiting beliefs. And so I want to talk to you about energetic clutter and how it applies more broadly to our lives, right? So in the beginning of this year, the animals were working with me to clear space, to provide more opening and space for attunements and some openings for some really cool information that came through. And so I was watching Marie Kondo, Tidying Up on Netflix. Anyone? Binge watching? If you haven't watched it, you have a jewel waiting for you. It's amazing. So after a bout of watching a lot of Tidying Up, I was walking into my room and my animal guides kept showing up at the base of my bookshelf where I had a lot of books that I'd collected since high school in Brazil. And so I'm walking by and I'm like, okay, I guess they want to talk to me about these books, and I realize they want me to go through them. So I'm feeling pretty good until I grab the first book, and it's Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Now, I love Hemingway. I love his writing. That's one of those books that I would go back to often and reread over and over and over again. And so they're just looking at me, and I get it. They want me to let go of the book, right? And so if anyone's read that book, it's all about unattainable love, unhappiness, disconnection. So being the bigger person, I'm like, okay, I'll let that book go, no problem. So I think I'm about to go on my merry way and do my thing, and I walk back, and they're still there just looking at me. So of course, what now, right? And so they have me read the selection of books that I had. And the titles read Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, which was a book about Vietnam vets coming home with PTSD. It was a book about the Trail of Tears called And the Earth Shall Weep, followed by a book about the lead singer of the band Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, and it was called Heavier Than Heaven. And the last book in the row was about the band Pearl Jam called 5 Against 1. So I look at it and I go, ugh, okay, I get it, right? And so not to be one to concede without a fight, I say, fine, guys, I will get rid of these books, but I want to keep the books about the bands. Those are important to me. And so ever so patiently, the animals look at me, and they say, have you read the book? I say, yes. They say, okay. Have you learned what you needed to from those books? I said, yeah. And they say, so why are you carrying them around? Right? Mic drop. I get it. Basically, what they were mirroring back to me is I was carrying these heavy vibrations. It was, I was carrying them literally, metaphorically, psychologically, and I was carrying them from home to home to home since high school in Brazil, not really giving it much thought, right? So this is an example of how our animal companions really help us sort through our energetic clutter, whether they are, books or even just our limiting beliefs. And for us, humans, limiting beliefs tend to be our heaviest energetic clutter. And so for those of you not familiar with limiting beliefs, what they are stories we tell ourselves ever since we were children, usually, right? And these are stories we tell ourselves to create constructs about our world, to categorize our worlds. They're kind of energetic shorthands. Usually they're created for protection, for survival, or to thrive, right? And these are the stories we tell ourselves so that we can decide what's good, what's bad, what people like, what I should project, what people don't like, what I need to hide. And we create these stories as children, and they go with us throughout our lives, right? Now, the interesting thing about these limiting beliefs is they're not all shaped by ourselves, right? They're shaped by a lot of different energies out there. Limiting stories and beliefs are created by our ego, our true self, right, our true divine energy. They can be shaped by our egoic self, which are creating those mental constructs. They can be shaped by ancestral lineage, right, passed down from our parents or generation to generation. They can be shaped by others who we encounter on a day-to-day as we kind of pick up their energy and their experiences and their circumstances. And they can be shaped by the collective. So it's really interesting, as we become observers, we'll start noticing which limiting beliefs are shaped by our own true energy and our own experiences, which are authentically ours, and then how many others we've picked up and inherited. And the stories we tell ourselves and those limiting beliefs truly permeate our lives, right? We know the ones that have been handed down to us in pop culture, like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I love that one. Or you got to work hard to achieve anything of value. I mean, the millennials are questioning that one for us as a collective. Or, the belief that you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then how about those limiting beliefs that we know really well? The story that you have to fall in love, get married, buy a home, have children, in that order, right? So as we go through these limiting beliefs, we realize that they're really here shaping our lives, but that not all of them are ours, right? We haven't really created all of these based on our experiences. So for us, it's going to be really important as we sort through this energetic clutter of limiting beliefs to understand the motivation behind them. Because unless we understand why they were created in the first place, how they've played out in my life, and why I don't need it anymore, it's hard to let go and have that reevaluation. So that's where I love to talk about my favorite theory in psychology, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so Maslow was a humanist psychologist who came up with this hierarchy of needs, this theory, in the 1940s. So it's pretty recent. And he theorizes that as humans, we all want to work towards self-actualization, which basically means being the best version of ourselves. But in order to do so, we have to make sure that our most primal and basic needs are met, right? Starting at the physiological, making sure we have clean air and food. Then we can move up into the needs of safety and love and belonging and intimacy. And only then can we move into this point of self-actualization, right? But in order to get there, we have to start at the very base. And that's going to be our physiological needs. So all of us as humans, in order to thrive and get to that point of self-actualization, we have to make sure we have clean air, we have food, that we have a means of survival, that our body's running okay, right? Because none of us are concerned about the next novel we're going to write if we're looking for our next meal. Assuming that's taken care of, we move up into the pyramid, into the next needs, and those are going to be needs of safety. We want to make sure that we have things around us that can protect us and provide comfort. We want family who can rally around us. We want to ensure that we have well-being and that we have ways and means to pay for things that bring us comfort and well-being, right? Assuming those needs are met, we move up to love and belonging. And if anyone's taken any psychology or sociology course, you might have heard the expression that humans are animals, but we're social animals, right? We crave that love, that intimacy, whether it's romantic, friendship, or familial. We want to have that shared experience. And at that point, once we've addressed our physiological, our emotional, we go into the psychological needs, which are building esteem, right? So building esteem basically means that I feel good about myself, that I respect myself, I have other role models that I can look up to, I have goals that I'm setting, I can meet them, and that I'm generally a pretty good person, right? And at this point, I'm pretty well-rounded, right? I have my basic needs met, I'm safe, I have relationships in my life that are, helping me thrive, and I feel pretty good. I've got these goals and I'm meeting them. Then we can move on to that self-actualization. And that's really basically saying you're the best version of yourself that you can be. If it had been an Instagram post, it would be #blessed, right? And so it's really all about, in that frame of mind, You're dealing with understanding your role in the universe. You're dealing with acceptance of facts. You're philosophizing. You're understanding how you affect your world and how your world affects you. You're really forward thinking at this point, right? And so what I want to do now is take a moment to compare our animals' needs to our human needs. And in doing this, we're actually taking a huge step. We're acknowledging that our animals also have similar needs to ours and that they're just as important. We're also saying that our animal companions also aspire to self-actualization, which means they're not only accompanying us on our spiritual journey, they're walking their own ascension path as well, and we're just collaborating and helping each other along the way. So in my estimation, this really gives credit where credit is due to our animal companions, right? We're acknowledging that beyond mere companionship, they're here with their own jobs, their own journeys, their own path, and that we're supporting each other as equals along the way. So if you'll allow me to do that, we'll start talking about our animals' needs in context of our humans' needs. So if we look at the physiological needs, the humans is going to be on this side, the animals on the right-hand side. They too need nourishment. They need food, they need water, they need clean air, their body needs to be running okay. If we move up to the animals' needs in terms of safety, that's where we're looking at providing shelter and a pack. And it's worth noting that in this point, the pack is less about socialization and kind of creating those relationships. It's more about safety in numbers. When we look at Maslow's need for the humans for love and belonging, I theorize that for the animal companions, they get that through exercise and training, right? Because when we're going on a hike with our animal companions, when we're working with them on their commands, when we're working towards common goals and objectives, they feel part of our pack. They feel loved. They feel belonging. And then moving up to esteem, that's where for animal companions, recently we've talked a lot about mental enrichment. So anyone who has any pet has probably bought a puzzle toy or maybe looked online at different games that we can do with the animal companions to help give them tasks and jobs to do. And so mental enrichment is kind of where traditional training has plateaued, right? Most trainers nowadays will say, all right, we got to get your dog, we have to make sure they're healthy, we have to give them exercise, we have to give them jobs to do, and we have to give them mental enrichment. What we're doing today is we're bridging up. We're pushing through and breaking that ceiling into the self-actualization, into that energetic connection, because that's truly where the juiciness lies. That's where we get to move along the ascension path together. That's where we all meet our needs. And so with Maslow, we understand the physiological needs, we understand the emotional needs, the psychological needs as well. As we talk about the energetic connection, we're going to want to layer in energy, right? And what better way to talk about energy in terms of the chakras, right? Because as humans, we have 7 major chakras. Our animals do as well. And our 7 major chakras reflect different themes and experiences that as humans, we all can relate to. And our animals' 7 chakras have the same themes attached. So if we layer in our needs and our animals' needs, if we acknowledge the fact that they do act as mirrors reflecting back energetic patterns to us, then the chakras create an amazing jumping off point to understand a little better, well, what theme are they reflecting back to me? So most of us are familiar with the chakras, but I'm just going to do a quick refresh. For anyone who's not super familiar with the chakras, they are spinning vortices of energy, and each chakra is associated with a different region in our bodies as well as a universal theme. So we'll start with the first chakra, which is the root chakra located right at the base of our spine. And the root chakra has to do with themes surrounding I am. And so with that, we tend to explore matters of safety, of grounding, of our relationship to the earth and our interconnectedness. The second chakra has to do with themes around I feel, right? So we tend to deal with matters of the myth of separation, of balancing my needs versus your needs, the balance between the yin and yang, the masculine and the feminine. It also has to do with sexuality, pleasure, and our creativity. The third chakra in the solar plexus has to do with themes surrounding I do. And so matters that we tend to deal with the third chakra are going to be stepping into our power, creative output, taking action, taking responsibility. The fourth chakra is the heart chakra, and it's often called the jewel of the soul, which I find beautiful. And with the fourth chakra, we're going to be dealing with themes around I love, right? So themes around intimacy, self-acceptance, creating energetic boundaries around our space and our energy. The fifth chakra has to do with themes of I speak and I'm heard. And so with that, we tend to deal with matters of finding our authentic voice, speaking our truth, speaking up on behalf of ourselves, and finding our own form of leadership. The sixth chakra is the third eye, has to do with matters of I see. So with the sixth chakra, it's all about intuition, forward seeing, also seeing illusion versus reality, right? Because a lot of times we pull the veil over our eyes. We don't want to see what's really there. The seventh chakra has to do with themes of I understand. It's also called the crown chakra. And in Maslow's terms, it would have to do with self-actualization. And this is going to be really about understanding the big picture, my role in the universe, and having faith in moments of crisis. So as we look at these different chakras, as we layer in, Maslow's understanding of human motivation, we've understood our animal's motivation, and now we understand the overlay with the energy that we have in common. Now we have a pretty solid roadmap. And so our animals are helping us along this journey, and a lot of people might say, but why? Why not go off and do their thing by themselves? Because they're pretty far evolved. They're kind of carrying us around for the ride. And so that's where enter soul contracts, right? So soul contracts or sacred contracts, this is a premise that most of us are probably familiar with, but let's kind of take a step back and talk about these contracts in terms of other humans, right? And so the idea of a sacred or soul contract is that before we even embody, our soul is up in the ethers with other souls, and we're coming up with a blueprint for this existence and this embodiment. And a soul might say, you know what, at this point in my evolution, I need to learn about themes of, compassion for others, maybe learning about abundance in accumulation versus in spiritual terms. And maybe this lifetime I want to learn how to take a leap of faith versus making such informed, calculated decisions all the time. Another member of our soul family might look at us and be like, you know what? I have similar lessons. So why don't we meet up down on the earth plane? I'll trigger you. We'll grapple with some of these energetic issues, and we'll see where we land this lifetime. Right? So our soul family, if we ascribe to the fact that we have a soul family, that we're here and we have a blueprint of different themes and experiences and lessons that we want to learn, then we're able to look at experiences not so much as good or bad, but more so in terms of, all right, this is the lesson that's coming up for me right now. Thank you, whoever you were, even though it was the most frustrating experience. I'm grateful that you brought this up to my attention for the healing. Now, our animal companions also have soul contracts with us and sacred contracts. So if, just as different humans and experiences come into our lives at different times, our animal companions come with us to share different lessons at different times. And so this is really important, because one thing the animals want you to know about as we talk about animals as mirrors is that you are not doing anything to them, right? Because as soon as pet parents realize, oh my gosh, they're reflecting my energy, so does that mean my animal companion didn't have to be sick, or maybe if I had learned the lesson sooner, they wouldn't be so anxious or barking on leash? That is not the case at all. They say, no, no, no. It's not about making each other wrong. This is a shared journey, right? I like to think about it as a classroom, right? Perhaps we were all in the classroom and we were all reading Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, which I had to let go of, but that's okay. And instead of each of us doing separate book reports, we're doing a group project. That's really how they've explained their role in soul contracts and sacred contracts with me. And so for some animal companions, it's showing us unconditional love, where maybe we didn't experience it growing up. For other animal companions, it's about helping us step into our leadership and find that area in us where we can feel confident to speak up for ourselves. For other animal companions, they're showing us that it's okay to set up loving boundaries. And then for others, they're really here to propel us on our life mission, as was the case with animals and me and their introduction of the Pleiadians. So I want to set the stage a little bit. It was March 20th, 2016. By that time, I had left advertising. I had worked as a traditional dog trainer, and I had undergone my spiritual awakening. I was listening to every spiritual podcast I could get my hands on. I was reading everything, listening to everything. At that point, I'd taken animal communication courses to remember that skill that always was so innate to me as a child. And I was thirsty. I was thirsting for more. And it was March 20th, 2016, and I remember being so knocked out that I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. March 23rd, 2016 on the equinox, I got up at 7, super energized, and this information was just downloaded to me. I got this roadmap of how our pets' behaviors link up to limiting beliefs, linked up to the chakras. And so at 7 a.m., I opened my computer. By 9:52 a.m., I had an entire presentation of philosophy that just poured out. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. This is exactly what the Pleiadians and the animals brought to me. So the same way that, we talked about Maslow's pyramid and the importance of understanding motivation, when we're working with our animal companions, different pet behaviors can be a really good indication of what themes are playing out more broadly in our lives. And so what the Pleiadians had downloaded to me that morning on March 23rd was a system where I mapped out the common pet behaviors with the chakras. And the intention here is really to create a jumping off point so that if your animal companion has on-leash reactivity or is suffering from separation anxiety, we already have a set of limiting beliefs that we can go to and start checking off. Does this one resonate with me? Not really. That probably doesn't have a lot of stickiness. Does this one? Oh my gosh, this comes up all the time, over and over and over again. So that gets us a starting point. So the way they explained it to me is with the first chakra, that has to do with issues around I am, grounding, safety, security. The pet behavior that draws our attention to that first chakra is on-leash reactivity. So if your animal companion has on-leash reactivity, if they're barking, if they're lunging, if they're aggressive, these are signs that maybe the human in their lives is grappling with a little bit of those issues of the first chakra. Maybe they don't feel fully grounded. Maybe they're in between jobs. Maybe they're not so sure about their relationship, but there tend to be bigger changes underfoot going on. For the second chakra, the pet behavior that they link to it is separation anxiety, right? Because the second chakra is all about that myth of separation, right? If you're not with them, they're anxious. They're reflecting back that notion that we don't realize, that even if we're not there in the room with them, we still can be part of their energy and their energetic makeup. Right? The second chakra also has a lot to do with issues of boundaries, right? Setting up boundaries and making sure that your needs are just as important as everyone else's in your life. And as pet parents, and as a lot of parents to human children, we tend to put our needs last, right? The third chakra, that has to do with themes around I do. And so the behavior that they linked up with that is attention barking, nipping, and chewing. So all of those kind of nuisance behaviors that people call, right? And in those cases, the animals are barking at you to get moving, get that spiritual project going, get that creative project out, start that blog, get that book. Come on, it's time, it's time. With the fourth chakra, that's themes of I love. And so what I see the animals reflect back is through guest reactivity, right? If someone comes into your home and they're reactive and they're protective of their home or their environment or you. And so what they're asking us to look at in those scenarios are going to be our own energetic boundaries and our own compassion to self. And also, who are we letting into our space, right? Because oftentimes, pet parents are also empaths, right? So we're bleeding hearts. We feel for everyone. We let people in. We listen to their problems. But the only people we're not truly compassionate with are ourselves, right? We tend to be a little hard on ourselves. So with guest reactivity, they're asking you to look at themes around the fourth chakra and I love and intimacy and self-care and self-acceptance. With the fifth chakra, these are matters of I speak. And what I find is barking sometimes has to do with the fifth chakra, but really what they're asking you to do is step into your own leadership. And it's really interesting because I tend to call in a lot of women, who they enjoy this philosophy because it's collaborative, it's not dominant, and they tend to be in relationships, right? And the number one thing I hear over and over and over is, but my husband, the dog listens to my husband. And so, of course, because men have been taught to be leaders from day one, what the animals are here to do, especially for us women, is to show us our own feminine way of being a leader, right? Stepping into our femininity. We don't have to do things the way that the men in our lives do with our animal companions. I always say, I'm not a very strong person, right? So if I'm working with a 50-pound dog and they decide to pull, I'm gone, right? So it's really about finding those places where I'm anchoring in my own sense of leadership, and sometimes a whisper is more powerful than anything we can do. So the fifth chakra is about stepping into our own leadership, and it's actually one of my favorites to work with. Sixth chakra, that typically has to do with accidents around the house. Because what happens when our animal companions are having accidents around the house is they tend to be drawing our attention to things that we don't want to look at, especially relationships. Maybe they always have accidents when your mother-in-law came over, someone who you have some reservations about, right? So they're asking you to look at those relationships with fresh eyes. With the seventh chakra, they linked up transition pets and lost pets, because those are the times where as much as we can be a mindful community and as much as we can be spiritual, when those things happen, they rock our worlds, right? When we lose a pet or if they're really sick, and we really have to have faith, because that's the one time I find with pet parents that they'll say, I totally ascribe to this, but what if it's all BS? Right? So our animals help us kind of work through that with the seventh chakra. And one thing that's worth mentioning is that although my expertise is in dog training, and a lot of what we talked about so far is with dogs, this concept translates to any animal, any dog, any cat, any horse, any animal in the wild. As long as you have an energetic connection, you can draw a parallel from the chakras. And so what this roadmap does is it's fantastic at showing us broader themes in our lives, right? It draws attention. The chakras are always very thematic. So let's talk about some themes. And so I want to talk to you about how 2 eggs changed my life. And they really got my career back on track. And these are the actual eggs, by the way. And in that moment, as this all was going down, I realized that this was about so much more than just eggs. This was about the I shoulds and I feel bads, so I wills, right? So for a little bit of context to set the stage of how these eggs came to be, by this point, I was downloaded the information from the Pleiadians and the animals. I had this roadmap. And the second that was downloaded to me, I knew that that was my life's purpose, that everything that I had happened to me in my life really brought me to a place where I was here to be the voice piece for the animals and the galactic allies who entrusted me with this. Who remembers Maslow's pyramid from the 5th grade, right? I had that Reiki training, which familiarized myself with the chakras. In advertising, I knew how to put together, a presentation and communicate different concepts. So I was all in. I knew that sharing the common healing between pet parents and the animals was my life's mission, right? So much so that I left my life in New York City, I left my business that I had built, I left my friends, I left my network, I left it all to move to Los Angeles and keep going on my life's purpose because I had a calling to go there. And so even with the knowledge that that was my life's mission, when I got to LA, I still started doing things the old way, right? I started with traditional dog training, and I met a few different clients who I loved in their pups. And so one client in particular, and one dog, who are truly my soulmates and my soul family, they asked me, after doing a traditional session, would you consider doing adventure walks with my puppy for desensitization purposes, maybe once a week? I said, you know what, it's not anything I offer or plan to offer, but absolutely, I'm in, right? So I start doing these adventure walks once a week. Next thing I know, she's calling me because, the daycare provider flaked or, something came up, and I find myself taking on a few more of these adventure walks. And eventually, I'm committing to do it twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. Before I know it, I'm spending over 3 hours during every workday doing these adventure walks. And I'm to the point where if people call me to do podcast interviews or have a business meeting, I'm like, oh man, it coincides with the adventure walk, right? And so don't get me wrong, I love that dog. He was my buddy. Like, we are friends, we are connected, we are soulmates. I got to go on these amazing daily adventure walks in Southern California. Like, how awesome is that? And it provided me some financial security, right? It was some nice, steady income. But dog walking is not what I'm here to do. That's not my soul's mission, right? It doesn't help me further the message about our animal companions and our relationship with them and how we can ascend together. So I'm thinking about this, and it's lunchtime, right? And so I'm chatting with some of my animal guides, and I'm in the kitchen, I open the fridge, I'm like, gosh, it's lunchtime. My go-to is a bag of Lay's potato chips. That's usually what I grab for lunch, and I'm on my way. But that particular day, I said, you know what? I kind of feel bad. I feel like I should eat something healthier. So I survey the fridge, and I decide on egg whites and broccoli. Now, there's one thing you really have to know about me to understand the context of this story. I come from a very long family of microwavers and women who cannot cook. Me saying I want to cook egg whites and broccoli is the equivalent of like an average person saying I want to prepare a cordon bleu meal, right? It was aggressive, but I was in. I was committed. So I pull out the eggs, and I crack one, and I remember thinking, whoa, that egg white or that egg yolk came out really fast. It's cool. I'll be better prepared for the second. Cut to this picture. Right? And so the animal companions that I've been chatting with, they're in stitches, they're laughing, I'm trying to clean it up, and like the paper towel lights up from the burner. I mean, it was just a comedy of errors, right? And through it all, I get it. I understand the message, right? The message is, make sure that we're spending time and focusing on what we're good at and what we're here to do. Because what we love doing and what we're good at is really going to be an indication of what your life's mission is to contribute to yourself and to the whole, right? So the animal companions look at me after they kind of catch their breath from laughing so hard, and they're talking to me about it, and I understand, and they say, so why did you try to cook that? I was like, well, I kind of felt bad. I felt I should. And they say, all right, where else in your life are you doing something because you feel bad out of a sense of duty or because you think you should? So into my awareness comes my adventures with my animal friend, right? With my furry friend, those adventure walks. And so click, right? Everything kind of came together. I was like, okay, I get it. It's time to let that go, right? And so circumstances changed very quickly, and the adventure walks were no more. And, I started doing a lot more with my soul mission and getting out there and sharing this message. So the animals, reminded me, this is a really important message. Stick to what you're good at and what you're passionate about. And so I'm going to ask you, along with the animal companions, along the lines of what they asked me, take stock of your life. How many places are you doing things because you think you should, because you think you ought to, or because you think you feel bad? And then take stock of how many places you do things because they bring you joy, because they contribute to the collective, or because they contribute to your highest good. And if you're anything like me, you'll realize there's a huge imbalance, right? We're squandering away a lot of time with the I shoulds, I ought tos, and I feel bads. And so this is truly just a reminder that everything in our life acts as a symbol, right? And the animals are going to be there helping you interpret these different messages, whether it's through their behavior or even just, preparing eggs. So they're really here to act as guides and accompany us on these ascension journeys that we're on. So with that, going back to more traditional themes with pet training, I want to give you guys some practical examples of how our pet's behavior can mirror back some bigger energetic themes in our lives. And I want to start with a case study of Colonel. And so Colonel is a pup who is so near and dear to my heart. He was one of my first clients in New York City. And he had, like most dogs in New York City, he had some on-leash reactivity. And so on walks, he would bark and he would lunge. And so the pet parents called me in, and they were an amazing couple, right? And they were so committed to helping Colonel through this behavior. They were both at the sessions, and then as follow-ups at dinner, they would sit together and talk about each other's walks if they couldn't go as a family unit. They would talk about, what training strategies were working better than others. They would talk about the triggers, which set them off, which were new, which were ones that they saw over and over again. And through this journaling, they realized there was another pattern. And the pattern was when they had unsettled energy between them as a couple, Colonel's behavior on leash tended to be exacerbated. So they started taking that same mindful approach and that same diligence that they applied towards Colonel's training towards their own relationship. So they had a practice that before it was time to go to bed, they would talk compassionately and lovingly about any unsettled, things. They would say, what have I done anything today that has upset you or left you uneasy? And what is something I did today that you're grateful for or brought you joy? So that was their practice. And in this, they realized that Colonel's behavior was shifting, right? Along with the traditional training that they were doing, shifting the energy had a tremendous impact. And they also had cats in the house, by the way, and they realized that there were changes going on with the cat's behavior as well, just, from being part of it. So the theme that Colonel's on-leash reactivity was bringing up for this particular family was the theme of the first chakra of interconnectedness, that remembrance that we're all in this together, that we're all one, right? So the limiting belief associated with the first chakra that they started looking at is that story that we might have told ourselves at some point that I am separate from my surroundings, right? It's me versus them. My life has nothing to do with the bigger surroundings and environment. So they were able to look at these themes and this limiting belief and challenge it and say, you know what? We are all connected, and we're a stronger family unit when we're able to share in our experiences together. They also realized the ripple effect that their relationship had on other members in their family. So if they wanted to change one thing about their world, like Colonel's on-leash behavior, they had to look at the inception, at their relationship, kind of patient zero, if you will. And we saw really good results with Colonel. To this day, he's doing a lot better on leash. And when he is a bit more reactive, the pet parents are very mindful at checking themselves and being like, okay, how are we doing? How's our energy? What's been going on in our lives? And of course, he still has a nemesis here or there, which a lot of dogs do. But for the most part, things are going smoothly. So in contrast, I want to tell you a story about Penny. And she also had on-leash reactivity. And this time she was in Los Angeles, which, from a training standpoint, Los Angeles is a lot more laid back than New York City and Manhattan streets, right? So I'm like, this will be a piece of cake. No problem, we can handle this. So Penny would bark at other people on leash and be really protective of the mom. And what I came to realize is that there was a lot of volatility and unsettled energy in the home, right? Because what I learned is that the husband, he suffered an accident, so he was using alcohol and pills to kind of manage the pain a little bit, which created some volatility, some unpredictability in the house. And the wife, as tends to be in these situations, she didn't really draw his attention to it or talk about it. It was kind of swept under the rug. And because of the husband's limitations, the walks were really the wife's responsibility. So it's no surprise that we saw that, Penny was picking up on this energy with her mom, where the mom felt really out of control about what was going on in her home. So she felt really defensive and protective of the mother, right? And so what we find is when there's a situation where the pet parent feels out of control, sometimes the only form of control is the predictability of a walk, even if that predictability is that it's reactivity on leash, right? Every time they go out, she's going to react. That she could count on. And so one might think, well, if you're going to create predictability and control in your life, wouldn't you want it to be an awesome walk, right? And so the other kind of layer to the energy when it came to Penny and her parent was that Penny's on-leash reactivity served as a proxy, right? It was an opportunity for the wife to talk about how stressed she was about her husband's situation without having to talk about the husband, right? It was acceptable to say, gosh, I'm really stressed out about Penny. I have no control over what's going on with Penny. I'm scared she's going to lash out and I won't know what to do. All these emotions she felt about her husband, but she didn't feel like she could verbalize them. And then with Penny and pets, we rally around pets, right? So her neighbors would stop by and ask how Penny's training was going, and they would offer sympathy and compassion. So Penny's on-leash reactivity was really an opportunity for the mom to create a sense of control, right, where she didn't feel she had safety. She was looking for control, which is issues of that first chakra. And some of the limiting beliefs that were coming up were, I'm not in control of what happens, I'm unable to protect myself, and I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And in her case, she wasn't ready to revisit and re-examine those limiting beliefs because they were still serving her. And that's okay too, right? As long as we're aware of what's going on, we have the free will and the choice to make a decision. The next case study is Pepper. And so Pepper was a dog that displayed separation anxiety. And I was called in because the pet parent also felt that the dog wasn't very affectionate, right? And so the story goes, this was going to be the pet parent's first dog. And he was so excited. He had always wanted to experience that unconditional love of a dog. He had thoughts and dreams of how their relationship would go, jetting off to the Hamptons, coming home, going on walks every morning. It was just going to be idyllic, right? And then cut to, he gets the dog and the dog comes home and he just feels like the relationship is a little bit off, right? And so I asked, that's understandable, how did you manage that? And what he told me and what I observed is he would remove more and more boundaries, right? He would give more and more space, take away more of his own freedom to give it to the dog. He would not go out with friends, he would stay home with the dog. Right? And so what happened is, in this instance, the pet, Pepper, was reflecting back to the pet parent disregard. Because the more that as pet parents we disregard ourselves and our own needs, our pets will mirror that back to us. And not because they are validating that we're not worthy of having needs or that we're unworthy, as means for you to set up loving boundaries as a dress rehearsal, to do it in bigger places in our lives, right? Because sure enough, this pet parent, he had issues with his dog with separation anxiety, but good Lord, did he have boundary issues in relationships, in his career, and at work, everywhere, basically. And so what Pepper was doing with the separation anxiety, and by being a bit standoffish, was he was drawing attention to the themes of the second chakra. And in this case, it was about subjugating one's own needs, right? So the limiting beliefs that were coming up, I feel my own needs are not as important as everyone else's, or I feel I alone cannot lead a fulfilling life, right? So he was looking to Pepper for that kind of twin flame, right? To be the yin to his yang, to make him whole. He was giving everything. He wouldn't even eat a meal. He felt guilty eating a meal in front of Pepper because he felt guilty that he was ingesting the food that Pepper wanted so much. So it was really interesting because as we delve deeper with this, with the training work, he did say growing up, this was verbatim almost told to him. His needs did not matter, and that, without a successful job, without a successful partner, without success, he would not be complete. So the animal companion was just mirroring that back to him as an opportunity for us to have that discussion with the pet parent. Moving on to Cotton, this is one of my favorite stories. So Cotton was a dog in New York, and I got called in because the pet parent was like, Cotton is just barking up a storm and I can't get her to stop. So we schedule a time to get together, and I walk into her apartment, and it's gotta be, 10:30 in the morning. I walk in, dogs barking, the woman's in the kitchen, cooking a salmon fillet with spinach or greens, and the dog is just barking at her, and she's running back to the oven being like, oh my gosh, can we start this session in here because she needs her breakfast. Turns out she cooks the dog salmon fillet twice a day, fresh, because she won't eat it if it's been refrigerated. And the dog's just barking, like, get my food done, what are you doing talking to this lady? And I'm just observing, right? So then her husband walks in, and he's kind of grumpy and disgruntled, and he mutters something and kind of, goes off. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And she said, we're a bit estranged, and I walk on eggshells around him. And then, next thing you know, her 20-year-old something son walks in boxers, demanding iced coffee. And she drops everything she's doing, runs to the fridge. The Cotton's now barking at her to get back to the stove. She pulls out the iced coffee, gives it to the son, who's, again, 26, and he goes, it's watered down by now, because she had prepared it earlier when he was supposed to get up. So she quickly rushes off to prepare another coffee. So are we surprised that Cotton's barking orders at this woman? The surprising part is that this woman was exceptional. She was witty, she was charming, she was so creative, she was so successful in her career in her own right. I mean, she's one of the most impressive women that I ever met, except for when she was in the kitchen or around her family. And so what Cotton was really reflecting back with the barking was for this woman to step into her power. You can't play small to make others feel okay about themselves, because as exceptional as she was, it seemed like the other family members didn't have a lot going on, right? So she would play small so that they didn't feel intimidated by her wit or her power, her accomplishments. And Cotton was having none of it. So the limiting belief that came up in this story was, I do not want to shine to avoid making others feel bad. And I think a lot of us, especially if we're dealing with spiritual gifts, or maybe, as we're in this time of transition and shifts, there are people having a tough time. So maybe we don't feel like we want to talk about our accomplishments as much because we don't want to broadcast them, right? So this was a really interesting example of Cotton and how her barking was drawing attention to those issues of the third chakra, of taking responsibility for who you truly are and stepping into your power. Because when you step into your power and you shine, oftentimes you inspire others to do the same. We tend to think that playing small is serving them, but it really isn't. And then we tend to find ourselves in a place of servitude versus being in service. And that's such an important distinction for all of us in the spiritual community, and especially those of us who are sensitive and who are empaths, because it's all too easy to go into that place of servitude where we're subjugating our needs, where we're saying we don't matter, we'll do whatever you need. Whereas being in service means I'm going to do what's best for you, even if you don't really like it. I'm also going to do what's best for me because I got to look out for myself and share my gifts so that I can inspire others. So there were a lot of really interesting lessons going on with Cotton and her family. And so we've talked a lot about dogs, so let's talk about cats a little bit. So I don't do training per se with cats, but I do a lot of pet intuitive readings, right? So then I get to interact with cats, dogs, horses, crabs, all sorts of animals, which makes it pretty cool. And so I got a call from Merlin's mom. And Merlin was a cat, and he was having what seemed to be accidents or elimination issues, right? But they tend to be in a very specific spot. They tended to be on the boyfriend's side of the bed where he slept, right? And so Merlin, male cat, new guy coming into the picture. I was like, okay, I understand, but let's go a little bit deeper, right? And so as we explored and we checked in with Merlin, it was really quite interesting, because what was coming up is this woman felt she was at an age where she had accomplished a lot with her career, she had relationships here and there, but none of them worked out, but she really wanted a family. And she had been dating this guy for a while, and he wasn't amazing, but maybe he would do, right? So she was kind of trying to convince herself that maybe this guy is the right guy, I don't know. Merlin was having none of it. Merlin was like, no, you got to see this for what it is, even if it means making a switch and, starting fresh and doing something new. And one thing that I love more than anything, is when the name matches the message. So we haven't talked about pet numerology tonight, and that's, we'll have to do another talk about that. But it's so interesting how we call in the energy that we need. And if we think of Merlin, we think of Avalon, right? And we think of King Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere. And Guinevere always had to choose between her heart, Lancelot, and her sense of duty and the practical choice, which was King Arthur. So I thought that was just a really neat layer to the story about how the cat Merlin was showing her that choice. You can choose what you think is the easy path, or you can do something that would have potential to have a great relationship for you. So the theme that Merlin was bringing up was themes of the sixth chakra, which, accidents are linked to the sixth chakra. And it was all about illusion versus reality and lies that we're kind of telling ourselves. She was pulling the wool over her eyes, being like, maybe it'll be fine, maybe it's good enough, just because she wanted to have that family. So the limiting belief that was being highlighted was, I do not want to see people or situations for what they truly are, right? I'm just going to shut down that sixth chakra. Next, we had a few people with birds here, right? If you have birds, raise your hand. All right, I love it. So I got a call similarly, I don't do bird training, but I got a call for a pet reading, right? A pet intuitive session. And so I got to meet Charlie. And Charlie is interesting because Charlie is, it can be a girl's name or a guy's name. And so I got a call because Charlie's mom contacted me because Charlie was pulling out its own feathers, right? And not only that, but Charlie found herself in the corner of the bird cage, and the other birds would come and peck at her. And she didn't seem to fight it or defend herself. She almost seemed like she was just, well, this is it. This is my lot in life. I'm just going to let them peck at me, and I'm going to pull out my own feathers as well. And what was really interesting is as we got into the reading with the animal companions, what kind of was being mirrored back was being uncomfortable in her own skin. And what was really interesting is that the pet parent, she was at a point where she was not feeling much self-acceptance towards herself, right? She didn't have a lot of self-love. And part of what was going on is she had been questioning her sexuality and her, for a while, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to tell people about it or where she was with it. And she really was beating up on herself. She wasn't sure about who she was. She wasn't comfortable in her own skin. But she was like, I really should tell people. Why am I so scared? So it's no surprise that Charlie, a reflection of her, was pulling out her own feathers and just uncomfortable in her own skin and allowing herself to, get beat up because the pet mom was kind of beating herself up with that inner voice. So the theme was themes around the fourth chakra of self-love and acceptance. And the limiting belief that was being mirrored is, I do not deserve the same compassion I show others. And if others knew how I truly felt or who I truly was, they would leave. And how many of us cannot relate to that, right? As we enter our spiritual gifts, as we step more fully into who we are, we might have to have those hard conversations with our parents. My dad still thinks I'm a dog walker, P.S. He has no idea what I do. And that's okay. I've tried to kind of beat around the bush a few times, but it's just not his, it would blow his mind. But a lot of us have those conversations with people, or we're scared to tell our best friends because they might think we're crazy, or they might think, we've gone off the deep end. How many times do we hide who we truly are, and how often do we feel uncomfortable in our own skin as well? Whether it's because we're questioning our gender, our sexuality, or because we're dealing with a whole new set of reality with these spiritual awakenings that we're having. So these are all ways that our animal companions have brought up different themes for their pet parents. So what I want to do right now is do a quick exercise with you guys. I want everyone to take a deep breath and close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. And I want you to think of something your animal companion does, whether it's something you love or something that frustrates you, like chewing up the cabinets. So just really anchor in to that behavior or that experience. And so when you think of that experience, what emotions come up for you? It might be frustration, might be joy. And as these emotions come up, I want you to feel into your body where it is that it's manifesting. You might feel a tingle in your body or a tightness. And as you feel into that emotion and that vibration and that frequency, I want you to ask yourself, where else in your life do you experience those same emotions? Is it in a relationship? Is it maybe at work? When you go home and visit family? And as you get familiarized with this energy, I want you to ask yourself, when do you first remember feeling this way? Maybe an event or a memory comes to mind. Maybe it's a number, like an age. And as you anchor into that, whether it's pleasing or triggering, ask yourself, are you ready to change the story? Because if you are, we have the power to change our story. Good. So open your eyes. Very good, everyone. And so, you might have thought of, the presenting issue with your animal companion might have been a dog barking at us, right? Maybe my dog's barking at me. And maybe I feel it manifest as a tightness in my throat. Maybe it's that, oh, that's so frustrating. I feel my throat tighten up. And as I think about where else in my life I experience those same emotions, it might be at a meeting at work, right? Maybe I say something and someone 2 seconds after says the exact same thing and everyone goes, that's brilliant, let's absolutely do that, right? That, oh my gosh, why do they never hear me when I say these things? I said the exact same thing, right? If you think back to when do you first remember feeling this way, it might have been a memory that popped in when you were a child. And maybe you were trying to express to someone a fear, or maybe tell an adult about an experience that you had, and maybe you got pushed aside. And the story that was created based off that experience is my voice doesn't matter. Nobody can hear me or wants to hear me anyway, right? And so that becomes the theme that gets played out over and over in those meetings, with your dog reflecting it back to you. So if you truly are ready to change the story, then it's a choose your own adventure novel, right? We get to pick the path that we take. And what I always like to do in those scenarios is create a new mantra or an affirmation, so that every time I feel that frustration bubbling up or my throat tightening up, I can repeat, whether out loud or even just simply in my head, I'm heard, my voice matters. When I speak authentically, people hear me. And I'll repeat that to myself every time that comes up. And through that repetition, we can change our story. We can change our experiences, and we can shift the energy around us for ourselves and for our pets. Which kind of gets me to the fact that, this philosophy that we talk about, I like to couch it in terms of self-help for pet's sake, right? It's a little pun on self-help for Pete's sake, but, advertising. But really what we're doing is we're shifting energies around us more broadly in our lives, because when we change our energy, when we're vibrating more smoothly, when our chakras in our bodies are aligned, we can carry higher vibrations and frequencies. And by shifting that, we shift our animal companions' reality as well, right? Many of you as pet parents know when you're home and you're happy and you're in a great mood, your animal companion's probably right there with you, matching that energy, right? When you're having a tough time, they're down there with you in the trenches. So we're really on that co-creative path together and on those parallel paths, right? So we talked about how our animal companions are mirrors to us. We talked about how their behavior can reflect back bigger energetic patterns in our lives. We talked about which specific behaviors link to specific chakras. And we talked about stories, whether they were case studies or we're feeling into our own stories. And now we have an idea of how we can shift the reality for ourselves and for our pets. And so I want to leave you with one final thought. Right? When it comes to our animal companions, they are the most amazing guides because they know us, they see us. Even if we had a bad day, if we had a bad month, if we had a bad few years, they see our sparkle. They see who we are. They see our multidimensional abilities. So when we look at our animal companions and we see that unconditional love, we see those eyes, we see that cuteness, we see that vulnerability, and we have that desire to care for them, they're just reflecting back everything we hold within ourselves. So this quote by Alan Cohen, I think, perfectly encompasses how we relate to our animal companions. And it says, "Those who love you are not fooled by mistakes you have made or dark images that you hold about yourself. They remember your beauty when you feel ugly, your wholeness when you're broken, and your innocence when you feel guilty, and your purpose when you're confused." And isn't that what our animal companions do for us on this path of ascension? So I just want to thank everybody for taking time today to talk about the animals and have them as part of this discussion about conscious living and mindfulness. And thank you so much for being part of this new Vanguard and Pet Guardianship. Because as we vibrate into the 5D reality and we change stories and we enter that age of Aquarius, we're going to be able to anchor in all that love, collaboration, and partnership with these amazing little beings who are soul family and who are always there for us, and we're always there for them. So thank you so much, you guys. So I know it's been a long day for you guys, but if you have questions, this is a great time to come up and at the mic so we can get it for posterity and let us know what your thoughts are, your experiences.
Hi, my name is Marin, and I just wanted to ask a follow-up question with Cotton, for example. Were you able to get him to stop barking? And I mean, how did you break that habit?
So that's actually a really interesting question. Thank you for that. And for me, Cotton also brought me a lesson, right? Because even though I'm not Cotton's pet parent, I'm part of the dynamic, right? And so in that one, it was early on in my training career, and I wanted so badly to fix everything, right? So I wanted to fix it, I want to fix it, I want to fix it. What Cotton taught me is the most that I can do is bring awareness to the situation and to do it gently, right? Because one thing that's always so important when we're working with pet parents, especially for animal communicators or pet trainers or have our hands-on work with animals, is that we're as considerate of the pet parents as we are of the animals. So with Cotton's mom, I kind of pushed the water a little bit. I tested out the waters. I'd be like, wow, okay, so is this a typical morning? Okay, interesting. So what's your relationship? So I would ask probing questions, and she got to the point where she was able to, we walked the path together, and she realized what Cotton was reflecting back, but she wasn't yet ready to change the story. So it was kind of that lesson of you can bring up the awareness, you can let them know what it is, but until they're ready to change the story, the shifts won't happen, right? We all have free will. But there are other situations where it worked like a charm, to the point where I did a reading with a dog, and he was having lots of accidents and barking, and the pet parent said it was literally night and day. The next day, all of that stopped because the messages that needed to come through came through. So it's kind of case by case. Great question, though.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for the presentation. I loved it. I have a dog. She's the greatest teacher I've ever had. I never had any issues with her. I can't wait to go home and hug her. I'm so excited. Okay. So I recently been dating this guy. It's been moving fast. We're really connecting really nice. And he has a dog. His dog is ADD, all over the place. He does listen, but you kind of have to yell. I'm not a yeller. I don't have a lot of issues with him, but I did take him out quite often, get to know him. I'm bonding with him. I'm starting to love him too. But recently, he's listening to him when he makes command. Like, he'll sit for a second and then stand up and everything. Yeah. But he bit the ends of his table, and he never did that. And then we went to his room, and we came out. He was sitting on the couch, and he never does that. Yeah. And we both realized, like, is it me coming into... Because when I walk him, I don't hold him the way his owner holds, or his pet... His
nice, good catch.
His pet parent.
Yeah. I love it.
His pet parent, his guide. I tend to guide, because when I started walking him, he would go circles and circles and circles, and then I finally got him to one side, and it was just, I let the chain loose. I don't like the whole controlling factor. Yeah. And but so he had a harder time walking him. He bit his end tables, and again, we both found him on the couch, and I'm like, I'm the new thing in his life. Yeah. I don't know what to do. He gets really angry. He's also a little controlling around his environment, likes things a certain way.
The dog or your boyfriend?
My boyfriend.
Okay.
And and so he got really mad, and he's like holding his snout. I'm like, okay, that's enough. Like, leave him alone. He's an innocent, So what do you think? And what should I do?
I love that. That's such a good question, because so many animal companions have changes to their pack, whether it's couples breaking up and they lose a pack member, or in your case, a lot happier of a union, right? And so really, number one, they are so lucky to have you, because you realize that your dog and this dog are different beings, right? So it's beautiful that you're honoring their different tendencies and motivations, and that's also where pet numerology is super helpful to understand, what works best for them with training depending on their tendency and motivations. And so one thing is you finding your sweet spot with the training. So what's really going to be important is on walks, you need to create interest. This dog just wants to explore, it sounds like. He really wants to check things out. He wants to be part of the family. He's excited, but he doesn't know, but he still needs some guidance in that exploration. So from a traditional standpoint, one of my favorite things to do is the hustle steady game and the figure eights. So what we do is, if you're walking with him, how many times are we on leash and we just kind of, walk, we go around the same path, we're doing our things, our heads are in a million places. Walk with him, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, hustle and give kind of like a brisk walk, and then steady, ridiculously emphasize slow motion walking. Then change directions, hustle. So in this, changing directions, changing pace, that's gonna make it a lot more fun for your boyfriend's dog, especially when he's walking with you. And he's gonna respect you more, and you're gonna be more interesting to him, because on those walks, all of a sudden, this is a game, right? The other thing I like to do to connect energetically with whether it's dogs or horses are figure eights, where you walk on leash and you just walk in go to like a park, big figure eights, and just chant. Mantras are amazing. Animals get so soothed by mantras, and it also regulates our breathing, right? Because breathing really informs to them, is she stressed? Is she relaxed? We model relaxation for them. A lot of times we're stressed and we're like, cool down, it's okay, relax, what's going on? That's not very relaxed, right? So sometimes, deep breaths, less talking, shoulders down, and relax. All right, little one, we're moving, right? That's gonna be a really confident tone versus, okay, we're going. We don't have to yell. It's about meaning what we say and saying what we mean. Because in order to survive in nature, animals read energy, right? They have to figure out if you're sick, if the dog approaching the pack's aggressive. So he's constantly reading your energies. Your words don't really matter. It's going to be about how you feel on the walks, what you're exuding, your breath, and then creating these fun kind of exercises with him on walk. And that's going to calibrate him to you and your energy, and you'll find that better relationship indoors as well, because he's had more stimulation on these walks. But really great question. And practice commands, as much as your boyfriend might practice commands with him, you practice it with his dog as well. Remember, we want to make sure physiological needs are met, training is met, mental enrichment, and the energy. We want to take all that into account. Very cool. Another question.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I have a question. So I have, I'm on like my, I don't know, 4th or 5th dog. So I have a dog now who's just been, she's 6. And she's been like just like the best dog, like from puppy on, never a single issue with her, just like an amazing story that I won't even get into of how I got her. But now about 6 months to a year ago, she started with this separation anxiety when I would leave. And I was in kind of a transition. I was kind of injured and having to have people take care of me. And then I had to move. And now and then it sort of got better, but now I've moved again, from Florida up to New Hampshire. And she's with a lot of family, and she's like very, very happy, and she's just started with the separation anxiety again when I leave. And I'm looking at that second chakra stuff and trying to figure out, I'm in transition in my life too. And like just the night before, so I'm trying to make her more comfortable, and I went back to kind of crating her when I left. And just the night before I came here to this event, I'd gotten a new crate for her for when I left, and thought that would be comforting. And she actually demolished. I mean, she's only like 45 pounds. It was a cheap crate, I guess, and she demolished the whole crate and ripped it all apart and got out of it that night. And this all happened the night before I came, and it was just so traumatizing to me. So one, I was wondering if you had any insight in that.
And what's her name?
Lucy. Lucy. And she's like a border collie mix. And so if you had any insight into how I can help her and how I can kind of try to, when I think about the boundaries and that type of thing, I don't know, I'm trying to sort of piece together the pieces.
Yep, no, we got it.
But it's causing me so much stress, seeing her in distress and not being able to leave her, to where I just want to be with her now and not leave her alone, because I hate to see her suffering.
So your instincts are right on, right? From a traditional training standpoint, we want to create those loving boundaries. And for her, couple things. It might be a doggy gate in the bedroom versus a crate, so that she feels she has a bit more mobility, but that she doesn't have the entire home to protect, because they're den animals, so they want to feel safe and secure. But maybe the crate's a bit too small at this point. The other thing we want to do is ease her into the experience. So when you are able to spend time with her, do 5 minutes, in the confinement area, and then let her out, and then kind of ignore her when you let her out, because otherwise, a lot of time with crates and doggy pens, we let them out and all of a sudden it's like the biggest party because we're reunited. We don't want it to be such a big difference between us being there and her being alone. Then, of course, traditional training to build her confidence and make her feel okay and let her know that you've got her back. Listen, little one, I'm going to work with you. We collaborate. It's also going to create some mental stimulation, which is nice to kind of relax her. So when it is time to hang out alone, she's burnt off some of that mental energy, which makes them really tuckered out. Reiki music is one of my favorite things to leave on for our dogs when we leave. But from an energetic perspective, what's been going on with Lucy is she was saying that it's mirrored back a lot of your energy of this just jump into things with 2 full feet, I guess. So it's sort of like you don't give yourself an opportunity to ease into new situations either. You're kind of like all in or all out, which is interesting. And so that's also with the second chakra, right? It's like that balance, finding that flow. The other thing which is really interesting is she was saying this is also an opportunity for you to work on astral projection and sending your energy to her. This is going to be part of like your next level of spiritual growth, is learning how to throw your energy into different places and be 2 places at once, which is fascinating.
I'm very interested in that now, but I don't feel like I can.
Oh, well.
I'm like, I would like that, but I haven't.
It's time.
Being able to have an experience with
Yeah, and so that's where they're so good, because if you feel bad that she's missing you, that's that motivation for you to read a book on it, learn it, practice it, right? If it was just sort of like, there's nothing going on, I'm kind of interested in astral projection, I'll get to it eventually. That's a very different sense of urgency than, oh my God, this would help Lucy, I'm in, let's do it. So she's bringing that up, that if you're interested to it, just like the eggs, if it's something you're interested in, odds are you probably have that capability and that skill, and it's just a matter of remembering it.
Interesting. And so it's not that unusual for a dog to like never have these behaviors as a puppy or anything, and then all of a sudden at like 5 or 6 years into her life, it's now.
Yeah, so,
That's
you know,
'cause
it
it's
tends
what's
to
going
be
on with-
significant because if there's a lot of shifts in your life, right? And then also energetically, things have been nuts, right? A lot of dogs who are sensitive and who are surrounded by sensitive pet parents, they pick up on energy of the cosmos, on different, you know, ley lines and shifts going on in the collective. So odds are she's picking up on a lot of that. So the more clearing that we can do of ourselves and our space, the better off it's going to be for them as well. Yeah, we do see that, especially with like changes, and especially if pet parents were, they were sick or they were in recovery or something like that. We see that come up for sure. Very cool. Thank you for the question.
Hi.
Hey there.
Thank you for your presentation.
Aw, thank you.
I'm actually a dog sitter in Cleveland, and I have one client. She's actually my next door neighbor, and it seems as though that will be a frequent gig for me. I've known this dog since my childhood, and she's known me. But the first time I dog sat her, everything was fine. I would show her my hands because actually she's gotten older, and the parent even told me that with her years, with her age, she can't hear as well, and also she's been biting people, and she's like sent people to the hospital because of it. So the first time I was dog sitting her, I was really careful with that, showed her my hands, and then would pet her, and everything seemed to be fine. And then the last day, when I was watching her, literally about to leave, showed her my hands, and then she like laid down, was wagging her tail, and then I guess like my hand approached her mouth or her like her chin area, and then she just like gnawed on my finger. So I since have dog sat her, or have since watched her again, Rhea, and I couldn't help but be a little scared to touch her, to pet her. So I guess I'm wondering where that balance is and her trusting me. It did seem that she trusted me more the second time because she started sleeping in the bedroom with me. But for those of you who have been bitten by an animal and just like overcoming that fear, because I do love animals and I want to pet her, but just finding that balance.
My heart goes out to you. It's a cellular remembrance, right? Your body remembers at a cellular level that bite. And it feels extra emotionally charged because it feels like a betrayal because you guys have known each other forever and it came out of the blue. One thing I will say about that, especially as us pet professionals, I've been seeing an uptick in that fearfulness and aggressiveness coming through. So I do think it has to do with a lot of what's going on cosmically for the most sensitive dogs, but of course, being hard of hearing, sometimes they can be a little more testy, right? So a couple things come through. Number one, thank you for being so loving and asking this question on her behalf. That's beautiful. The thing that is coming up is sometimes the relationship and the contract is over. And if we keep pushing on it or kind of moving forward with it, we're going to get that message of it's a no, right? So what I'm finding is it might be a message for the pet parent to get some training or find ways to make her feel more confident, because just kind of ignoring the behavior and letting it go by, and maybe someone gets bit, maybe someone gets sent to the hospital, maybe they don't, that's not providing a lot of safety and security for the dog or for the pet parent or the person coming into the relationship, right? So perhaps if you do feel comfortable with that role, you could say, hey, have you considered training? And you can even say, listen, I'm not very comfortable doing this work. This is not my area of expertise. I'd be happy to join you if you have a trainer to work with the dog on these issues. Like, I'd be happy to be a participant and learn with you so that I can work towards a point where maybe we can dog sit again. But this is really an opportunity for you to stand up for yourself, right? Because again, I feel bad, so I should, right? It's not your first choice to go back and work with the dog that you've been bitten with. So you need to understand, like, is it time for me to move on or set better boundaries for myself? The other thing coming up with her is because she's losing some of her faculties, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to start communicating telepathically with her. So show her what you're going to be doing. Okay, little one, in my mind, show her a picture of you opening the door, you coming in, ask her if it's okay. So kind of communicate to her in visuals and messages and just energy and see if that changes the story. It is tough when we deal with animals that are biting, and typically there's just bigger issues that need to be addressed from a physical standpoint as well as energetic. And our role as the provider sometimes is to say, I'm not comfortable putting myself in danger because I feel bad saying no. So that's that. And it's so fun to be a pet sitter, right? We get to interact with all these amazing animals. We're like godmothers to all of them, and we get to learn from them as well without having to do the daily walks for like the next 18 years. So high five, sister. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, guys, it looks like we're wrapping up. Oh, one more question. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Ursula. I have a question.
Yes.
I witnessed a Saint Bernard attacking a person.
Mm-hmm.
Since that moment, I never had a problem with interacting with animals.
Mm-hmm.
Since that moment, I have the fear.
Yeah.
So should I get clearing on it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Again, we're seeing so many more animals kind of have that little bit of that, lashing out at the humans, and it's bringing something up for the collective. I'm entirely convinced that it's bringing something up for the collective, and I think that what happens is balance is what's coming through as the message, right? Because thank you for bringing this up. This is a message for the collective even, because when we're subjugating the needs of an animal companion or pets, right? Up until recently, we're like, dogs are dogs. They sleep in the yard. They're here to serve us. Now they're getting to the point where because they've been downtrodden, now they're kind of lashing out. So it's finding that balance, right? So part of it is understanding their motivation and where they're coming from, and understanding that that doesn't have to be your experience, and knowing that you have a healthy respect for animals. Because we do have to respect them just like children. We're starting to learn with children that it's not okay for strangers to just come and hug their children and, pet our children. It's also not okay for them to do that with dogs or any pet, cats or horses or whatever. So it's all about these questions are bringing up for the collective, finding that balance and that notion of consent even for animals. So that you're not going to get bitten because you're not going to go on top of a dog and not read its body language and try to hug it right off the bat. You're going to have healthy respect. You're going to be a good conversationalist. Hello, little one, how are you today? Oh, you don't seem very comfortable. Let me give you some more space. How's this? Right? So you can have that relationship and model what it's like to be respectful of the animal companions for those around you. And in that way, you raise the vibration for animals.
Thank you.
Very beautiful. Thank you. Awesome. So any final questions? All right, it looks like we're complete. Well, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been a long day, so I really appreciate everybody just reaching out and being part of this discussion. And I would love to continue the conversation. So I'm on social media. My website's petprana.com, and I just always love hearing about what's going on with you and your animal companions. So thank you so much, and happy training, everyone.